So this canteen was given to me by my mother, and it belonged to my grandfather, who I never met. His name was James Jewel Padgett. He carried this through World War II, and my mom gave this to me a few years back, but he inscribed on it. It looks like he took a knife or something and inscribed his initials, JJP, for James Jewel Padgett. This was his unit insignia, and Elba, ALA, for Alabama. That's where he's from. And on the bottom here, it has England, France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and then finally Germany. And he carried this through the war. I'm actually going on a tour here that's going to go from England to France to Belgium to Luxembourg and Germany. And so we're going to take this canteen back on its second voyage. And instead of being in a war, we're going to sing songs about it.
Better go down in the name of Jesus when you go down.
My name is Abe Partridge. I'm a songwriter and an artist from Mobile, Alabama. My dad was from a town called Andalusia, Alabama, and my mom was from a place called Strawn, Alabama. They're in the same county, very close together. My mother, her mother was my mama, who was with us on this earth until about 3 years ago or something like that. My mother was the youngest of her 3 children that she had with a man named James Jewel Padgett, who was my grandfather. So far as I know, this is the only place where my grandfather's name is memorialized here. But here it is right here. James J. Padgett, U.S. Army Sergeant, World War II, 1941 to 45. God bless America. Oh, shoot. Oh, I just ran a red light. So did your wife. Good thing it's a small town, though.
Yeah.
Man, ain't that a place now? Like an old Spanish villa.
Yeah.
In the middle of Andalusia. With a little river beside it. Did you see that?
Yeah.
The last time I was here was when we put my mama in the ground. And this was him, 1978. See that old church up there, that's where he went. That's where my mama went. Not this big monstrous thing over here with this triangle roof. That one with that old green cheap stained glass in it. I remember we used to walk over there. We used to walk over there and go in that church, and the women sat on one side and the men sat on the other, and they'd sing. And man, you talk about powerful, buddy.
Let me tell you right now, the devil is a liar. You gotta be filled with Holy Ghost fire when you go down. In the name of Jesus when you go down.
I'm Tina Jackson. I'm Abe Partridge's mother. My dad, he was a kind person. He would have done anything for anybody. He was a hard worker, worked all the time. He was a welder, but he was very sweet. He had 2 grandchildren at the time when he died at 58, and he loved them so much. But he was a family guy, and he had a lot of struggles, though.
So, like, I didn't really know a lot about him. If you had asked me 6 months ago what I knew about him, I knew he was in World War II. I seen his picture. You know, I know what his face as an elderly man looked like because his picture was always on my mama's wall. He was just somebody that I was aware of, but I never knew. I have memories of stories that I heard all throughout my life about him, but
You know, when you never meet somebody, it's hard to really, you know, feel a connection, I guess.
Hey, Aunt Gail.
Come on in.
How are you?
I'm good. How
They
are
just
you?
put this thing on me. It's my cousin Jeremy. You remember him?
They say keep things that bring you joy, and so these things
Here you
bring me
go.
joy. And there's another one of his army with his,
Oh,
of course, got a puppy.
Got a little puppy dog on it.
You didn't know Daddy, but he always
Had
loved his dogs.
Yeah.
He was just a late teenager. I believe he was 18 whenever he got called to service. He served across Europe in World War II. I saw this when I was a kid, that picture there with the American flag and his photo. From what I understand, that was something that he sent back from Europe, back home. You know, his picture there in that frame. When I saw that when I was a little boy, I was like, I really like that, you know. And my mama gave that to me, and I put it in that frame. And then sometime after I came back from the desert, my mama gave me that canteen.
Yeah, you know, when I was little, we didn't have much to play with. And I don't mean that we were poor. I just mean that there just wasn't any technology or anything. So I think I had one Barbie doll, but the one thing that I was attracted to that my daddy had was that canteen. He kept it on a nail in the kitchen, and I would get it and play with it, and I thought it was pretty cool, and I would just run my fingers over the etching, and I didn't have any idea what it meant. But I guess I must have done that a lot, because when he died, that's the one thing I asked for, was that canteen.
That canteen there sat on my shelf. Well, a guy named Gus Vandenberg, he's my agent over in the Netherlands and a good friend of mine. And he came over and I showed him the canteen, and he said, wow, you know, he said, your granddad was a hero. And then, you know, I was like, I need to write a song about that, about my grandfather, you know. Well, then my European tour got booked. Gus booked a bunch of shows for me over there. And then my friend David Ford, he booked some shows for me in England. And then lo and behold, you know, we got the tour together, and it was like, man, we're going from England, we're getting on a boat, going to France, we're going to Belgium, you know, and we're going to, well, and like on the canteen, we went into Luxembourg, and then I had the show in Germany, so we went to Germany. I just knew, okay, I've got to write this song, and I'm going to take that canteen on its second voyage across Europe. With a guitar, you know, where my grandfather had to go with a gun, I'm gonna go with a guitar, and we're gonna sing this song all across Europe. And dude, we did. I still can't believe it happened. It was amazing, you know.
Into the heat of the black belt fields, Uncle Sam echoed across Alabama and reached my pawpaw's cotton-picking hands, enlisted them for foreign lands.
I think every show, it was the last song I played, and I had to set it up with a little 5-minute, story about what's going on here. And I would display the canteen beside me at every show, and the people were just... I had so many people come up to me with tears in their eyes that I can't even... More than I could count came up to me with tears in their eyes, and they wanted to tell me the story of their grandfathers. But I heard so many stories about different people's family members over there and how moved they were. And it's just important. It's important to remember.
This guy told me a story about how the Nazis had come in this town, and they rounded up every male between 12 years old and up, took them out into the city square and murdered them all. And this man was telling me how there was a whole generation of men that they just didn't exist. Like this town, there was no men there. You know, there are now, but there was like just a whole generation of men that didn't exist. And there's been a lot of different kind of wars, you know, and you can talk about the justness or the rightness or the of different ones, but like if ever there was a war that should have been fought, that was it. We got on the ferry that went from Dover to Calais, France. And you could get out in the middle there and you could see England and France at the same time. I mean, that was a wild time, wasn't it?
We're in the English Strait going across the, I believe this is called the English Channel, on a big boat with our van down in the bottom of it. And that back there is Dover. Crossing this body of water over into France, just like this canteen did. I'm sure he crossed probably this very same body of water we're crossing right now.
We were all worried that they was going to stop us because of our, you know, we had a British guy in the car with us, and then, you know, me and you are Americans, and we got a van full of all kinds of shit. And we're just like, oh God. And we got up the thing, we showed them our stuff, and they were like, all right, great. And we were like, man, that was as easy as all get out, dude.
'Cause colors are all that matter when you're already outside the lines.
We stopped in Dunkirk because we was hungry. Come to find out, that was a big World War II site, you know. I don't really know if, you know, where my grandfather was in the grand scheme of all this thing. But there's a chance, I reckon, he might have actually walked those very streets.
This is some type of memorial. I ain't sure what kind, but it does have the years 39 to 45 listed here, and maybe my grandfather came through here, I don't know. And if you look over at that church over there, the front of it's covered and riddled with bullets. This was a cathedral. It's unbelievable, right?
You can tell where all that fighting was happening. Yeah, that was pretty horrific, you know. So through Guido, we found out, you know, that my grandfather was connected with the 4th Infantry. So we ended up driving down to Luxembourg, where the 4th Infantry came up. And we know that my grandfather was there because it's on his canteen. Well, so we like triangulated it, you know. We know he was in Luxembourg, and this is where he was in the 4th Infantry, so we found out where he was at, and we went there. This is where my grandfather fought. It was in the very infamous battle called the Battle of the Bulge, and they have a big memorial to it, which I'm sure we're going to learn a little bit about it today. And then we get there, and George Patton was there. And my mama told me back whenever I was doing this that one time when she was a young girl, they sat down one evening and they were watching TV, and they had a program on, and it was about George Patton.
The first 4 hours, we passed over a destroyed land.
Yeah, my dad never talked about the war too much. I guess it was, you know, too painful. But one night there was a special on TV, and it was about World War II. And I sat down beside him, and he started trying to tell me all the things that were happening and were going to happen. And it was probably the only time he ever opened up to me about anything. But, you know, and I was like thinking, when are you going to be through with this? And so I didn't watch the whole thing with him, and I regret that a lot, because at the time I just didn't realize how important it was, or what he had been through, and, you know, some of the things he might have shared if I had been willing to listen.
So we carried the canteen, put it there on George Patton's grave, and, you know, and then we just walked around the cemetery there, and then there were those fountains there. There was a fountain there for Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Remember that? And I filled it. I believe it was the John pool that I filled up the canteen. It's still got water in it right now from that Luxembourg memorial. And I want to tell you, those memorials over there are absolutely beautiful. Just lines as far as you could see of just crosses and stars of David, and it really demonstrates the very high cost that so many people had to pay. Because those represent men just like my grandfather. You know, those were other men just exactly like him who went all the way across the world and gave their life to keep monsters from ruling it, you know. We can only imagine what that must have been like. But man, going there, ooh, it was a really heavy kind of experience.
Well, now if anybody says, have you ever seen Bastogne? You can say, oh, I've seen more of Bastogne than you could even imagine. Oh, cool. There it is. Oh, shit, they ain't gonna let us in.
Bastogne, yeah, we went there, and they have the memorial to the Battle of the Bulge there. And we got there, and there was nobody there. The museum part was closed, but the memorial, we walked up there, we were the only people there, except from some dude mowing with a tractor. We walked around the whole thing. Unfortunately, it was blocked off where we couldn't go up to it, but because they're doing some construction on it. But yeah, we got to sit out there and play the song in front of the Bastogne Memorial. Here we are at the Bastogne Memorial for the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium. And this is my grandfather's canteen. And here's a song I wrote for him. Into the heat of them black belt fields, Uncle Sam echoed crossed Alabama and reached my pawpaws cotton-picking hands and enlisted them for foreign lands. And they took his plow and gave him a gun and taught him to march into the rising sun. So the sweat of his brow fell before he'd begun. Give the hell them devils had to come. And you're sitting on this hill where, you know, basically the Nazis were defeated. It was an honor. It was an honor for me to be able to tell that story. Otherwise, it would just be forgotten, you know? 'Cause that farm boy sailed the ocean blue. He buried buddies in France and Belgium too, fighting them Nazis nail and tooth till the Battle of the Bulge was through. He was fighting them Nazis nail and tooth till he came home with a soul split in two. Married my mama after 8 simple dates. Hard to work, but given to drink. And they had some babies and bought him a place as he tried to forget all he couldn't erase. And sleep was often more than he could bear, 'cause them Nazis would kill him in his nightmares. And he'd hide under furniture as ghostly shells took him back under Patton and pulled back the layers. But he kept that canteen hooked to the back door, and my mama never heard him talk about the war. But one time he tried and she ignored. She's too young to know what a hero was for. Then by 58 he was nearly through, and he went into town to get his scripts renewed. And he walked up to a man he never even knew, said, "Please hold me," looking real confused. Well, he walked up to a man he never even knew. He wanted to live, but his heart refused. You know, you die one time when you die, and then you die the second time when everybody that's still alive that forgets you. You know, in some way, by keeping somebody's memory alive, you know, they're still present in a way, you know.
I can't even listen to the song without crying, or talk to you without shedding tears, because where I'm sitting, I see me as a child knowing my dad and seeing it there in that place. And now after all these years, I see it where it is now and where y'all have taken it, and the story behind it. And my dad would be so honored. And I think about life and how people are here and then they're gone, and you know, you want to be remembered. And I just think it would be so cool if he knew, if I could just tell him how he's being remembered right now and how that meant something to Abe. I don't think there are words to even say how it makes me feel.
You know, like this story, it's like a story about connecting with your own story. That was my grandfather. You know, I do believe in God, and I don't believe that when you die, that's the end of it. And I believe that one day I'll meet him again, and maybe we'll be able to talk about all this. Yeah. And I'll get all them details that might have got wrong right for then, for sure.
JJP from Elba, LA.
You know, why I went around, why I did all this was it was an exercise in remembrance. You know, there's a reason for monuments. There's a reason for memorials. And I'm not somebody who supports, you know, monuments and memorials for despicable acts and despicable people, but there are things that should be memorialized and remembered. And in my own family, it was this. And so I wanted to trace my grandfather's steps so I could know what it was that I'll never truly know. But you know, when you're in a place, I was in a place and I had in my possession one of the very things that he had in his possession, and I was able to go around Europe and trace his footsteps. And remember the great price that he personally paid. And I'm going to teach my children that. I'm going to tell my children about it. I told my mom about it, you know. It was for my family. But then my cousin came and he made a documentary about it. And, you know, I want to tell other people about it. And like learning who my grandfather was, it made me proud. And I'm proud to be his grandson. And I couldn't have said that a few years ago because I didn't really know nothing about him. But then, you know, having retraced his steps and having learned who he was, I'm proud.
Into the heat of them black belt fields, Uncle Sam echoed, crossed Alabama and reached my pawpaws cotton picking hands and enlisted them for foreign lands. And they took his plow, they gave him a gun.